The royal palace of Eldoria was a place of unbearable routine. Princess Rosalind had spent her entire life drowning in a sea of curtsies, courtly smiles, and mind-numbing etiquette lessons. Every day was the same, dawn to dusk, trapped in gilded perfection. She was tired of it, tired of polite nods, of being told what to wear, what to say, and where to stand. Tired of sitting perfectly still during royal meetings, while stuffy old men talked about taxes and grain shipments. And so, when she stumbled upon a peasant girl in the palace gardens, one who looked strikingly like her, an idea exploded into her mind. A simple idea. A reckless, dangerous, brilliant idea. She proposed a trade. One day of freedom. The peasant girl, a girl named Lila, would take her place in the palace, while Rosalind ventured out into the real world. It was perfect. Lila hesitated, but the offer of gold, food, and a bed softer than hay was too tempting to refuse. They switched clothes. Rosalind, shedding her embroidered silks for a rough woolen dress, felt lighter than she had in years. She pulled up a hood, slipped past the guards, and disappeared into the bustling streets of Eldoria. For the first time in her life, she was free. She spent hours wandering the markets, sneaking bites of honey cakes, watching street performers juggle flaming torches. She climbed onto a rooftop just to see what the world looked like from above. And then, the dragon came. It arrived without warning. A thunderous roar split the sky. Shadows stretched across the city as massive wings blotted out the sun. People screamed as a beast of emerald scales and fire-filled eyes swooped low, its enormous claws grasping at the palace. And in one terrifying instant, it snatched Leela. Rosalind stood frozen, heart hammering. The dragon soared into the distance, disappearing into the clouds, taking Lila with it. And then the real horror struck her. The kingdom would think the princess had been kidnapped. The king would rally armies. Knights would ride into battle. And Lila, innocent, terrified Lila, would suffer for it. This was her fault, and she was the only one who could fix it. Her fingers clenched. There was no time for second-guessing. If she wanted to save her kingdom, if she wanted to save herself, she had to act. She needed a weapon. She needed a horse. She needed a plan. And above all, she needed to rescue herself before anyone figured out what she'd done. With nothing but a stolen sword, a grumpy talking horse, and the sheer force of her bad decisions, Rosalind charged headfirst into disaster. She had no idea what she was doing, but that had never stopped her before. Stealing a horse should have been easy. The royal stables had rows of magnificent war horses, sleek, muscular beasts trained for battle. Any knight would be honored to ride them. Rosalind, however, ended up with the worst one. The horse in question was a mangy, mud-covered creature with a permanently sour expression. He was tied to a post outside a tavern, gnawing aggressively on an old cabbage. She didn't have time to be picky. With zero experience in theft, she untied the reins, swung herself onto his back, and whispered, "Let's go." The horse didn't move. She kicked gently. Nothing. She kicked harder. Still nothing. Then, to her absolute horror, the horse turned his head and spoke. "Oh, I see," he grumbled. "You steal a horse and expect him to just gallop majestically into the sunset? Typical." Rosalind nearly fell off. She had heard legends of talking animals, of enchanted creatures bound by magic, cursed with knowledge. She just never thought her first conversation with one would be like this. She stammered. The horse rolled his eyes. "I suppose you're in a hurry? Running from someone? A crime, perhaps?" She tried not to panic. I need to save a girl from a dragon." The horse snorted. "Ah, that old quest." He sighed, then stretched lazily. "Fine, I'll help. But only because I was about to leave town anyway. Too many idiots around here." Before she could question what that meant, the horse suddenly bolted. Rosalind had exactly 1 second to regret all her choices before she was clutching onto the reins for dear life as the horse thundered out of the village, through the fields, past terrified farmers, straight toward the Forbidden Mountains, where the dragon's lair waited. She had stolen a sarcastic, self-important talking horse. And somehow, That was not the worst decision she had made today. The ride was not fun. The wind slapped her face. Her stolen sword bounced painfully against her leg. And worst of all, the horse wouldn't shut up. "So tell me," he said, as they galloped through an open meadow, "how exactly do you plan on defeating a dragon?" Rosalind gritted her teeth. "With a sword! Oh, lovely. You, a delicate princess, who has never fought a day in her life, are going to fight a fire-breathing lizard the size of a castle. Brilliant plan. Absolutely no flaws." She ignored him. It was fine. She would find the dragon, sneak into its lair, grab Lila, and escape. Simple. At least, it would have been, if they weren't being followed. The first sign of trouble came just before sunset. Rosalind felt it first, the uneasy sensation of being watched. Then, from the trees, she heard it. Hoofbeats, heavy, many, fast. She glanced back, and her stomach dropped. Knights, at least 10 of them, armored, swords gleaming. The king's royal guard. And at the front, Commander Vale, the most feared warrior in the kingdom. Rosalind's father had sent them. They thought she had been kidnapped, and if they caught her, if they dragged her back to the palace, Lila would be doomed. This was very bad. The horse sighed. Ah, yes. More idiots. Then, without waiting for her command, he took off. Faster than before. Faster than should have been possible. The trees blurred. The wind roared. Rosalind held on for dear life as the ground became a streak of green and gold beneath them. The knights gave chase. They weren't just hunting a princess. They were hunting a dragon's next victim. And they were gaining. The chase was a blur of thundering hooves and snapping branches. Rosalind's stolen horse, still unbothered by everything, raced through the dense woods, weaving between trees with terrifying speed. The knights were still behind them. And worse? They were getting closer. The weight of their armor didn't slow them down as much as she had hoped. Their war horses were trained for battle, relentless and disciplined. If they caught her, she would be dragged back to the palace in chains, back to a royal trial, back to a life of golden prisons and velvet lies. And worst of all, back before she could save Lila. She couldn't let that happen. Then, as if the universe had heard her desperation, the forest suddenly vanished. The trees ended abruptly, spilling them into a vast open clearing. But it wasn't just any clearing. It was a graveyard of bones. The ground was scorched black. Mountains of bleached skeletons littered the valley, bones of knights, beasts, and creatures she didn't recognize. The air smelled of smoke and ancient magic. At the center of it all, nestled between jagged cliffs, was a massive, dark cave. The entrance loomed like an open maw, wide enough to swallow a castle, the dragon's lair. Her horse skidded to a stop at the edge of the graveyard. Behind them, the knights hesitated. Even Commander Vale, the fearless war hero, paused, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. It was one thing to hunt a kidnapper. It was another to march willingly into a dragon's den. For the first time since her escape, Rosalind had the advantage. Her horse snorted. "Well, this is stupid." Rosalind barely heard him. Her pulse pounded. Somewhere inside that dark, endless cavern, Lila was trapped. Time was running out. She had two options. First, turn back. Let the knights take her home. Abandon Lila to her fate. Or, go forward. Face the dragon alone. The choice was obvious. She swung herself off the saddle. The horse immediately objected. "Oh, brilliant," he said dryly. "Walk into a dragon's lair with no plan. That definitely won't get you eaten." Rosalind ignored him. The knights were still frozen, unsure whether to follow. She had to move fast. With one deep breath, she ran into the cave. The cave swallowed her whole. The world became cold and damp, lit only by flickers of molten lava dripping down jagged rock walls. The air was thick with ash and the distant smell of burning metal. She walked carefully. With every step, her heartbeat echoed. Then, in the distance, she saw it. A massive pile of gold and treasure, heaped high as a mountain. And lying curled around it, scales glinting like molten bronze, was the dragon. It was asleep, Its enormous chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths. Smoke curled from its nostrils. Clawed wings twitched in restless slumber. But her eyes weren't on the dragon. They were on the tiny figure huddled in a gilded cage. Lila, still in Rosalind's silk dress, still wearing Rosalind's stolen crown, still very much alive. For now. But not for long, because as Rosalind took one cautious step forward, the dragon's eyes snapped open. The dragon's eyes snapped open, glowing like molten gold in the darkness. Rosalind froze. The creature's massive head lifted, nostrils flaring, scenting the air. Smoke curled from its snout, rising in lazy tendrils, filling the cavern with the scent of charred stone and something ancient. Then, without warning, the dragon moved. It unfurled from its pile of treasure like a waking storm, scales rippling with each slow, bone-shaking shift. Massive claws scraped against the stone, sending sparks into the air. Rosalind could barely breathe. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be doing this. This was the part of the story where knights stormed in with gleaming swords and glorious battle cries. This was the part where heroes fought and conquered, where fire met steel, where good triumphed over evil. But there were no knights. There was no hero. There was only her. And the dragon. The beast turned its head toward her, slowly, deliberately. Its pupils narrowed into slits. It saw her. It knew. A deep, rumbling growl filled the cavern, vibrating through Rosalind's bones. She had never heard a sound so ancient, so powerful, so full of quiet, simmering rage. Then the dragon spoke. Not in words, not in any way that could be understood by mortal tongues, but in a low, resonating force that filled the air, that whispered through the walls, that hummed in the very marrow of her bones. It asked a question, a simple, terrible question. Who are you? Rosalind's throat tightened. What was she supposed to say? Lying to a dragon was like lying to the wind. It would see through her. But the truth? The truth would be worse. The dragon would never believe she had only come to rescue a peasant. Not when the girl in the cage was dressed like a princess. To escape this alive, she had to become the role. Rosalind straightened, lifted her chin, summoned every drop of regal arrogance she had ever seen her parents wield, and she did something monumentally stupid. She stepped forward and placed a hand on her hip, as if facing down a lazy servant. She glared at the dragon, and she demanded, in a voice as cold as steel, "Why is my treasure missing?" The dragon's head tilted. The cavern fell silent. For a moment, just a moment, Rosalind thought it might actually work. Then the dragon laughed. A deep, thunderous sound, like an earthquake rolling through the mountains. Rosalind's stomach dropped. This was bad. This was very bad. The dragon was amused. And that meant it wasn't going to kill her yet. No, no, no. It was going to play with her. The dragon lowered its massive head until it was so close she could see her reflection in its golden eyes. And then, as if it had all the time in the world, it spoke again. Missing? It let the word linger, twisting in the air like smoke. Rosalind forced herself not to flinch. She had to hold her ground. She had to keep playing. She flicked her wrist, as if completely unimpressed. Yes, missing. My treasure. She gestured at the golden hoard behind it, as if it were beneath her notice. This is not all of it. Something is missing. Something important. You must return it to me. The dragon blinked slowly. The ground trembled as it exhaled. Then it turned, not toward the mountains of gold, but toward the gilded cage. The cage where Lila trembled, wide-eyed and frozen. The dragon's gaze lingered on the girl in the delicate royal dress. And then, softly, terribly, it smiled. Ah, it rumbled. I see. You want your treasure back. Rosalind's stomach turned to ice. She had played her hand. The dragon had called her bluff. And now? Now it was going to make her earn it. The dragon stretched its wings, sending a wave of hot wind through the cavern. Then, with a slow, deliberate cruelty, it laid out its terms. If she wanted her treasure back, if she wanted to prove herself worthy, she would have to complete a trial, a task so impossible, so utterly ridiculous that no knight, no hero, no warrior had ever succeeded. And if she failed, she wouldn't just lose Lila. She would join her in the cage. The dragon's golden eyes gleamed. "Survive the labyrinth," it purred. "And you may leave with your prize." The cavern trembled. A new passageway, one that hadn't existed a moment ago, yawned open in the stone. Dark, twisting, waiting. Rosalind had no choice. She steeled herself, took one last look at Lila's terrified face, and then, without another word, she stepped into the labyrinth. The moment Rosalind stepped into the passageway, the air changed. The warmth of the dragon's cavern vanished, replaced by an unnatural, bone-deep chill. The stone beneath her feet felt slick, almost alive, shifting ever so slightly as if it resented her presence. The walls loomed high above her, carved from ancient dark rock, twisting into an endless maze of shadowed corridors. There was no turning back. Behind her, the entrance had vanished. She was alone, and the labyrinth had awoken. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Not just the absence of sound, but a complete and utter void. No echoes, no breath of wind, no distant drips of water. Just nothing. As if the world itself was holding its breath. She took a careful step forward. Then another. The walls moved. Not physically, not in a way she could see, but somehow, in some impossible way, the very space around her shifted. Corridors that had once led forward suddenly curved away. Paths that seemed straight became spirals leading into endless darkness. She wasn't just trapped, she was lost. And the labyrinth knew it. A flicker of movement, just behind her. Rosalind spun. Nothing. Just empty corridors stretching endlessly in every direction. She swallowed. Another step. The movement came again. A flicker of something in the corner of her vision, just outside her reach. Then the whispering started. Low. Insidious. Crawling under her skin like ice. She couldn't make out the words, but she could feel them. Taunting, laughing, mocking. Her breathing quickened. She had read enough stories to recognize a trap when she saw one. The labyrinth wasn't just trying to confuse her, it was hunting her. The whispers grew louder. Something was behind her. And this time, she knew. If she turned around, it would be waiting. Her only option was to run. She didn't know how long she ran. Time didn't seem to exist here. But the corridors never ended. Every turn looked the same. Every path led her nowhere. And then, suddenly, a light. Faint, flickering, a way out. She hesitated. Something about it felt wrong. Too easy, too convenient. The whispers behind her grew louder, closer. She had to make a choice. Trust the light, or keep running in circles. Her instincts screamed at her. This was a trap. She clenched her fists, forced herself to ignore the light, and ran in the opposite direction. The moment she did, the illusion shattered. The light flickered and vanished, revealing nothing but a dead end. A trap. If she had followed it, she would have been sealed inside. The labyrinth was playing with her. But now, at least, she knew the truth. Nothing here was real, nothing could be trusted. And the only way out was to outthink the maze itself. The corridors shifted again. The walls trembled. A distant rumbling filled the air. Something ancient was stirring. She had reached the end. A massive stone archway rose before her, leading into a vast open chamber. At its center stood a colossal stone statue, its features worn with age, its eyes hollow and empty. A guardian. She knew that the moment she stepped forward, it would awaken. She was so close. The exit lay just beyond. But the labyrinth would not let her go so easily. She took a breath and stepped into the chamber. The air shook. The statue's eyes blazed to life. A low, earth-shaking growl filled the chamber. The final battle had begun. The moment Rosalind stepped into the chamber, the ground lurched. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as the massive stone guardian's eyes blazed with a golden fire. The cavern trembled under the force of its awakening. With a deep, echoing groan, the statue raised its colossal arms, Ancient stone grinding against stone. She had no weapon, no armor, just her stolen sword, which felt pathetically small compared to the guardian now towering over her. But there was no time to think, because in the next second, the guardian moved. It didn't move like a statue. It moved like a storm. A massive arm swung down, shattering the ground just inches from where she had been standing. The shockwave sent her flying, rolling across the chamber floor. Pain flared through her ribs, but she couldn't stop. Not now. The guardian loomed over her, shifting its stance, preparing its next strike. She forced herself to her feet, mind racing. She couldn't fight this thing head-on. That was impossible. But maybe she didn't have to. She remembered the light trap, how the labyrinth had tried to trick her. This place wasn't real, at least, not entirely. And if that was true, then maybe the guardian wasn't either. She dodged another crushing blow, barely avoiding being flattened, and looked up. There, at the far end of the chamber, hidden in the shadows, was a second archway, the real exit, and standing directly between her and freedom was a giant angry stone titan. Rosalind's heart pounded. There had to be a way past it. She just needed a distraction. The guardian lunged, faster than anything that size should be able to move. Rosalind reacted on instinct. She threw the sword, not at the guardian, but at the ceiling. The blade spun through the air, embedding itself into a jagged crack in the rock. For a split second, nothing. Then the entire cavern shuddered. A deep rumble filled the air. The crack in the ceiling widened, and then the rocks collapsed. The guardian roared as boulders crashed down around it, sending up a thick cloud of dust. Rosalind didn't wait to see if it survived. She ran, faster than she had ever run in her life. The ground trembled beneath her feet as she sprinted toward the exit, the air filled with the sound of the labyrinth coming apart. The archway was just ahead. 10 feet. 5. 1. She leapt. For a moment, weightlessness. Then, light. And suddenly, she was falling. Rosalind hit the ground hard. But the moment she opened her eyes, she knew she wasn't in the labyrinth anymore. She was back in the dragon's lair. And standing before her, watching her with a bemused expression, was the dragon itself. It had been waiting for her, waiting to see if she would survive. She had passed the test. But the real question was, what came next? The dragon's golden eyes gleamed, and for the first time, she realized the truth. It had never been about a ransom, never about a simple kidnapping. The dragon had chosen her. For what, she didn't yet know. But she was about to find out. Because this story wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. Since Rosalind has proven herself by escaping the labyrinth, the dragon clearly sees something in her. Potential, cunning, or maybe something far more mysterious.
If you like this video, then do subscribe to this channel.